So the sequel to that Marvel movie from a couple of years ago that was really funny finally came out. Let's crack it open. Ant-Man and the Wasp. So if you're here watching this video, then you know the gist of what Ant-Man and the Wasp is about. So I'm not going to give you a plot breakdown, especially since I'm trying to keep away from spoilers in this one. I'll do a spoiler video in a couple of days, but I want to give you guys the weekend to see the movie before I start blabbing about all the crazy stuff that happens in it. So first I'm going to get the negative stuff out of the way, the stuff that I didn't really feel like worked, because I have a lot more to talk about as far as the positives go. So let's get right into that. First big problem I have is there's three evil entities in this movie, basically. You have, of course, Ghost. You have the feds that are, working on, you know the whole thing. Scott's under house arrest. You saw Infinity War, at least I hope you did. And then you have Walton Goggins and his crew. You saw him in the trailer. And if you have that many bad guys going on at the same time, things are going to get a little bit crowded. And this movie does suffer from that. I don't think it drags down the quality of the entire film, but I do think it makes the third act a little bit weaker. Another thing that I'm not quite sure about is the chemistry between Hope Van Dyne and Scott Lang. We know that from the last movie that they were setting up a relationship for these two characters to be in this time around, but I'm just not quite sure if I believe in it wholeheartedly. I just feel like the way that they portrayed it on screen, I'm not really buying it. Now I'm going to get into the positives. First thing I want to say is great performances from everybody. Everybody really, they feel more comfortable in their roles this time around. They really bring it, especially characters like Michael Pena's Louise and eventually Lily's Hope Van Dyne. I really want to give shout outs to a certain actor in the movie, but I can't because I kind of spoiled some things that happens in it, so I'm going to wait until Monday to talk about that. Another thing is I really like that this movie had smaller stakes, Black Panther was about Killmonger trying to take over the entire world and kill all the white people. There's dogs outside my house. And then you have Thanos is on a quest to wipe out half of life across the entire universe, those are some major stakes. This movie, very small, very personal story. It doesn't really affect anybody outside of the characters that we're seeing on screen. And that's really refreshing, especially after every single one of these movies is a save the world type of deal. Another thing I really want to give this movie props for is the way that they found a balance between callbacks to the original and rehashing the original. They gave us a couple of reminders of what the more minor stories were carrying over from the first one to Captain America Civil War to now. But they don't give you sequelitis the way that like Deadpool 2 and Kingsman the Golden Circle did. You can watch this one and not have seen the last one and you'll be fine. But at the same time, you're not going to feel like you're watching the wrong movie. Another thing is this movie stands on its own extraordinarily well, as I said in my last point, but it also does do a really good job of blending into the MCU. I can't exactly explain why until I do my spoiler video. Just stay tuned for that. But the events of Captain America Civil War really do have a heavy effect on what happens in this movie. And it kind of shows you Cap, Natasha, and Falcon got really lucky getting away from what happened. And I am kind of excited to see how this same thing affects Barton when we eventually do see him in Avengers 4. Another thing that I feel like this movie pulls off a lot better than sequels of its kind is it really hits home with the comedy again. They kept the characters intact at their core, and that's what the comedy was built around. It wasn't circumstantial, it was more just the way that the characters interact. And on the way that the characters interact, this movie does something that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 really failed to do, in my opinion. It kept the characters where they were the last time we saw them and progressed them from that point. It didn't turn back time to the very first time we saw any of them and have them go through their entire team-building arc again. That was very stale in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and I'm glad that they didn't make that same mistake here. I also want to point out, without spoiling too much, that this movie has very strong undertones of the importance of family, basically. Family is something that carries this entire story together. You knew that, though, because the whole thing is Michelle Pfeiffer's Janet Van Dyne character is supposed to be returning. So, of course, it's all going to be about family, but it goes beyond that. It goes more than you would expect it to. And a quick thing, there are some really interesting effects surrounding the villain that I'm not going to talk about until I do my spoiler video because it has to do with that character's origin. But the effects that they do to de-age Michelle Pfeiffer and Michael Douglas, just industrial light magic. It's just that magic. There's really nothing else I can say about that. It's extraordinary. But all in all, if I was to give this movie a grade, on the grading system that I'm still working on. This movie is definitely worth the price of admission. Take your friends to go see it. It's a great time. There's some laughs, there's some heart. It really earns its emotional moments, you know. So it sets itself apart from movies like Deadpool 2. But I would definitely recommend going to see this movie. Even if you didn't really like the first Ant-Man, this one does clean up a lot of the mess that the last one had. You know, it's got a different sort of villain. The villain is more relatable, not just, I want power. This villain's actually got a more emotional story that you can connect to and you can feel bad for her. I hope that's not a spoiler.
Don't squelch, rap it hard.